Hello audio fans and music listeners, welcome back to the channel. My name is Gavin. I am your host here at the Audiophile Wannabe Show, and first of all I want to wish everybody a very happy, very pleasant Thanksgiving holiday season. Hope you've had a great end of the week and holiday so far. And on today's episode we're going to review our results of the comparison between the AUDIOQUEST Rocket 33 cables, these little puppies right here, and the GR Research 16 strand cables. So you can see the Rocket 33s. They're a really good looking set of cables. This past weekend, if you saw my other video, I had to put a additional set of binding posts on, not binding posts, but the banana connectors on these because my Cambridge AXR 100 receiver, even though it has a set of binding posts, will not accept spades. So far that's the only negative that I've seen with that receiver. Great receiver, love it, but it won't take spades. So I had to put a set of banana plugs on here also because the Klipsch Forte ones that I have, I put two connectors in the back of those. So didn't have any option for spades, so I had to do something else. So put the banana connectors on these. And as you know, if you remember seeing these on the previous video on these are the GR Research cables, and they look fantastic, look really good. Really like the woven construction here, and but they have their nice little banana connectors on these, as you can see right there. So they fit nicely into the tube connectors on the back of the Klipsch Forte ones, and we're gonna go over the results of what we found out on this comparison. Before we get into the results though, I do want to basically set the stage for this conversation in that I want to go over the context of the listening situation for these cables. You know, the deeper I get into this hobby, and if you've watched any other videos, you know how much I tend to kind of harp on these days the significance of the room itself as being part of the system, if not the most important part of the system. And so wanted to set the context for the listening situation because I do believe that in listening to these cables and comparing them, that a good deal of the outcome is due to the system itself in the room, and the results are going to vary from system to system. The results that I share with you today basically just reflect how they sounded to me in my listening situation, and I can pretty much bank on or guarantee that your results may be similar, but you'd probably get different results on your system. And I think it's key to highlight those differences and why they are what they are. So we'll go over that here in just a few minutes. Okay, so setting the context for the listening situation, you can see the primary listening room here. And this is a little bit older photo, back when I was still listening to the HTA 200 tube amp with the Cambridge components. But you can see that this room, it's an 11 by 14 size room with an 8-foot ceiling, and the room is treated. So it's got ATS acoustic panels on the walls and in the upper corners of the room. And the curtain on the right is an actual window, but just to kind of make a little bit of a symmetrical aesthetic, I put one on the left side of the room, and there are treated panels behind each one of those curtains to give it a symmetrical sound effect in this room. And also just to show here that there are the same ATS panels on the ceiling. I have one towards the front middle and one towards the back middle of the room. The one that you see on the right is the one in the back, and is basically just above and behind me in the listening position. And this photo right here is just to point out the specifics of the system itself, the components. There's a Cambridge Audio CXC CD transport when using CDs that I play through a CXN 100, as you can see there on the bottom right. And then from there, the signal runs into the Prima Luna Evo 300 tube amp that you see on the top left. So all power and interconnect cables are GR Research, and the optical cable on the back of the system is an AUDIOQUEST cable. And then the signal runs through the Evo 100 into the AXR 100 receiver, which is a 100 by 2 channel receiver, and from there obviously into the Klipsch Forte ones, which have Kreitz crossovers and GR Research tube connectors, and is also dampened with aluminum seal tape and the GR Research no-res. And another point that's definitely worth mentioning, and this is an older photo as well, but as you can see that the Forte 1s, the clip speakers, are actually sitting on some Harbor Freight floor dollies. So not exactly the best for sound quality. I admit that when I get through with the current upgrading that I've been doing for the past year in the system, the very last thing that I'll do is actually take these speakers off the dollies and just set them on the floor. So believe it or not, that will actually help to stabilize bass a little bit further and help improve the sound that way. But wanted to point that out because the speakers are sitting 5 inches exactly above the ground, which puts the tweeters right at ear level. And another reason that I wanted to mention that is because, as you can see, the chair there, that's the listening chair, ear position relative to the speakers is exactly 6 feet from the tweeters. So you've got some horn speakers that are sitting in a position where the tweeters are exactly ear level. Honest to goodness, a little bit close, to be honest with you, but the size of the room, that's the optimal listening position to get the soundstage effect. But being 6 feet from the speakers at ear level on the tweeters, the system itself tends to be a little bit bright, and so that's very much worth noting for the sake of this study. And just one other key point while we're on that subject is that the tweeters in both the Heresy ones that I have and these speakers are not the titanium version. They are the regular unleaded standard tweeters. Okay, so what are some of the key takeaways from setting up the context for the results that we'll look at here in just a minute? Well, the first being that the room itself, the system, is very clean, it's very clear, and it's very vibrant. So the system with those clip speakers does have a lot of presence in the mid-range and the high frequencies. So tending to lean on the bright side already, any cable that's introduced into the system that does tend to be more open and airy in those same frequency ranges will exacerbate the tendency of my system to hear the brightness that it could project. And then secondly, as I discussed just a minute ago, the listening position relative to the location of the speakers and the height of the speakers off the ground will also exacerbate the tendency to hearing a little bit more brightness in this system. But let me just clarify that with all the improvements and upgrades that I've made to the system so far, the system is by no means too bright to enjoy to where it would cause much listening fatigue, which is a common problem when it comes to listening to horn speakers. So a great case in point to point out the significance of why rooms matter and system treatments matter. Once you see the results here in just a minute, just know that the results that you see were even more different just from my initial comparison of these two cables in this room. So when I had the Klipsch Heresy 1s in here and listened to both sets of cables, the differences that we're going to look at in these results were even greater in this room, because this room does not have any treatments, and the Heresy 1s have those K700 horns with the K55 drivers, which those compression drivers tend to be a little bit more harsh on the ears anyway. And I had to do a lot of dampening to those speakers to tone down a lot of that harshness. So eventually got those to where they were pleasant to listen to, but there was a significant difference just in the initial comparison of these two cables in this room with the Heresies than it was with the results listening to the speakers, the Forte 1s, in the main listening room. So just wanted to point that out. And the last point to make from setting up the context was, obviously I use a lot of GR Research gear. Have a lot of all my cables so far have been theirs, minus the AUDIOQUEST optical cable, which is a fantastic cable, and working with communicating with both groups has been fantastic. All the folks that I've talked to at both companies are super easy to work with and talk to. Both are very knowledgeable and helpful, and have thoroughly enjoyed communicating with both parties. But the point behind saying that, sorry, I almost forgot, is just that even though I've got a decent amount of GR Research gear, I honestly don't feel that I'm very biased in that regards. My whole point in doing this is just for the overall listening experience and trying to understand how various products differ. Just sharing my experience for what that's worth. So, all right, so having said all that, let's take a look at the results. Okay, so here we go. I set all this up in an Excel chart. So as you can see on the left side, there were 9 songs that I listened to, and the characteristics I was primarily listening for were soundstage, imaging, overall clarity of the cables, refinement, which I think we can also say is basically how accurate they may be or how articulate. I was also listening for decay, just being able to hear how various sounds and vocals tend to cascade across the room. Also vocals, just how do the vocals sound, and overall bass sound, the tone and brightness. And the reason I was listening for brightness and listening fatigue, that's something that you kind of have to monitor, because you don't want that to creep in and become a problem, because that can limit not just your overall enjoyment of your listening experience, but can also limit how much time you can listen to them in a particular sitting. So, when I listen to the Heresy ones, I do really enjoy those speakers, but even though I've had a lot of dampening for those, still really can only listen to those for about 45 minutes or an hour at the most. So just to throw that out there as an example. And then also musicality. Sometimes we hear about songs just sounding musical. That term, in my understanding, has to do with just how much enjoyment or overall emotional connection that you can get out of listening to something. So, just thinking in terms of when I listen to these 2 cables, how easy is it for me just to kind of get lost in the music and just listen to the music without actually thinking about any of the kind of stuff that we're discussing right now, but just the overall sheer enjoyment of listening. How easy is it to just get into the enjoyment of listening to the music? And one other point about brightness to point out is that the grading scale is 1 to 5, 5 being the best, but in terms of brightness, it more reflects how easy the cables are on the ears. So 1 to 5 doesn't necessarily mean 5 being brighter. 5 being a better score would mean how easy or how much more pleasant the cables are on the ear. And to be honest with you, overall, I very much enjoyed listening to both sets of cables equally as much. But the reason I mentioned that is because looking at the scores on the bottom right, when I totaled up the totals for each category, the AUDIOQUEST got 375.5 out of 420, which equates to, we'll just say 89 out of 100. So 89%, 89.4%. And then the GR Research got a 416.5 out of 420. So, that would be basically a 99 out of 100, thinking about it in terms of percentages. So I hope it makes sense when I say that this score is as much of a reflection on the room and the system as it is the cables. Which is why I say that you can take these exact same cables and put them in a different system, a different room, and get different results. So having said that, now let's go back to the characteristics that we're looking at from the top left to right. We can see that soundstage and imaging were basically spot on, and they both project a soundstage that's really excellent, and they image very well. But oddly enough, on the song "Chocolate Chip Trip" by Tool, you can see there that they kind of edged out the GR Research cables. And that's because the soundstage was noticeably bigger on that one song. So I can't explain it, but it did seem like just when the toms were rolling and the bells were rolling at the very beginning of the song, and some of the various sounds hearing throughout the tune were expanded a little bit further out and a little bit higher on the soundstage than with the GR Research cables. That was the only song out of these 9 that I detected that on. But really interesting point, so just wanted to throw that out there. And the next difference that I noticed listening between these 2 cables, when you look at clarity, refinement, and decay, the AUDIOQUEST cables do tend to be a little bit more open and airy, in the mids, the upper mids, and the highs, I had expected that that would actually increase the clarity and the refinement or accuracy of the sound and allow me to hear the decay a little bit better. But I actually found that was the opposite. For whatever reason, it actually made the overall sound of the cables just a little bit less clear and less refined, which again, thought that would have been the opposite. But on several songs there, like if you look at Vietnam by Yossi Horikawa, oddly enough, on that particular song, the refinement got a little bit muddy sounding, which not much, but it did kind of hurt the overall refinement and accuracy of the sound. So that was kind of interesting. But that was the second point that I wanted to mention, was that, and again, I think a reflection of the room and the system as much as the cables. But because the AUDIOQUEST cables are a little bit more open and airy, that actually hurt just a little bit the scores on my system when it came to clarity, refinement, and decay. And when it came to vocal performance, I would say both cables did really well in that regard. And when it came to bass performance, the overall tone and sound of the bass with both cables was excellent. However, the GR Research cables did tend to have a little bit weightier bass, a weightier low end. They did have more punch, and you could get a little bit more thump, so to speak, out of the GR Research cables. And we've kind of already touched on brightness and the impact that my system brings to these cables in that regard, because the AUDIOQUEST do tend to be a little bit more open and airy in those upper mid ranges, which also contributed to a little bit of listening fatigue with those clip speakers. And overall, there's a little bit of difference when it comes to musicality and just being able to really enjoy and have that emotional connection and just kind of get lost in the music with both cables. Felt like the GR Research edged out just a little bit. So hope that explains the results from listening to these various songs with these two cables. So thoroughly enjoyed doing this experiment, this study, listening to both of these cables in the main listening room and also in the office room here. But the simplest way to summarize the difference between these two cables, in my experience, is that they're both great cables, and they do just have, I think, slightly different applications. For example, if you have horn speakers, if I had to make a recommendation, I would suggest the GR Research cables based on the information that we've discussed. But if your system is a more warmer sounding system and you feel like it's lacking a little bit in the mid-range and the highs, and you were looking at going with some professional grade cables, I would certainly recommend checking out the AUDIOQUEST cables, because they may improve your system's mid-range and upper frequency response. Okay, well, that's about it for today. Just wanted to share this information with you. Thoroughly enjoyed comparing both speaker cables. Obviously, they're both great cables, just have slightly different applications. Hope you guys have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you have watched this point and enjoyed the content, hope you don't mind me asking if you wouldn't mind clicking that like button and subscribing to the channel. And again, hope you have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you next time. Take care.